Welcome to the Locum Strategist podcast. I am your host, Simon Parsons, and this is the show where we help physicians take control of their skill set and create a life on their own terms by using locum tenens as a pathway to making that happen. Today, I am so excited to have a very special guest, Dr. Genevieve Jacobs. We came across each other on Instagram. I found her page where she has been documenting her locum tenens journey. Also found out that she has a YouTube channel and a blog where she shares some very incredibly powerful and useful information for anybody who's looking to do locum tenens work. What's cool though is she is very passionate about locums just like I am. So I am so excited to dive in. Dr. Jacobs, how are you doing today?
Thank you so much for that intro, Simon. I'm doing very well because it's my off week from locum work, so I get to do fun things like this.
Well, I wanted to start off by asking you about a little bit about your backstory. We'll get into locums in just a minute, but I want to know how you decided to get into medicine. And one of my favorite questions is, I know that when you go through residency, you have those long hours. Sometimes they're like 14, 16-hour days. I want to know what got you through that. So tell me a little bit about your backstory.
Sure. So I didn't always want to be a physician. I wanted to do research, actually. So my background is mostly in the research area. And so when I graduated college at Virginia Tech, I decided I wanted to pursue a PhD, actually. So I went and I approached some labs at the NIH in Bethesda, Maryland, and got my foot in the door and started doing some research with some really incredible labs, one of which led me to a traumatic brain injury clinical trial. And that's actually where I met my first physiatrist, who's a physical medicine and rehab specialist, which is now what I do full time. And when I met her, I was like, this is just such an interesting field. And it really caught my attention that you could work with patients that have brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, strokes, amputations, all these really interesting things. And so it was actually in the research setting that I decided I was drawn more to the clinical medicine part of things. So I actually made the transition from a research goal to a clinical medicine goal. So I decided after a couple of years of research, I was going to go to medical school and pursue a degree to get me to that point where I could be a physiatrist myself. So that's how I got into it, really. It was sort of serendipitous. It wasn't my original intent.
And then tell me when you started getting interested in locums. What was it that made you decide that this is something that you wanted to do? Was it like something that was going to be a temporary thing that you just enjoyed doing, or how did that evolve? How did you learn about it? Tell me more about that.
Well, I've always been interested in traveling, and the idea of getting paid to travel has always sounded really good to me. My parents were both very adventurous as they were growing up. My dad did his veterinary training in the Philippines. He did the Peace Corps in South America. My mom lived in Okinawa, grew up in England, traveled to and lived in all these different places. So that was sort of what I was brought up on, is experiencing other cultures, going to different places, doing things that are adventurous. So that was kind of part of my DNA growing up. And then when I was a medical student, I started hearing about locum work and travel medicine. So I would go to conferences even as a med student and ask different booths, like, do you have any locum positions open, or are these just permanent, or would you ever consider a locums doctor? So I've always wanted to be a travel physician. So when I was in residency, by the time I got to residency, I knew that that's what I wanted to do when I graduated. And that was for a few reasons, not just the adventure part of it, but also because I wasn't sure where I wanted to go full time. So when I graduated, I didn't know if, signing a 3-year contract at one place was going to be a good plan for me or not. I was a little skeptical, commitment shy, I guess. And then, the pandemic hit and everyone was just reevaluating their whole lives. And I thought to myself, let's just travel. So that's what I did. I haven't looked back.
That's amazing. So when you were in residency, what is the vibe like? And the reason I'm going to give you some context around this question, the vibe around locums. And the reason why I say this is because I started in this industry about 10 years ago. And I remember when I first started, there wasn't a whole lot of interest in locums. And there was even kind of almost like a stigma around it within some circles, as if like locums was something that you did if you couldn't get a job. And then over the years, I started seeing this change. And I think part of this is generational. And I'm really excited about this because, on one hand, I've seen older physicians that have stayed in one place their entire life and worked crazy hours. And then I've seen this younger generation of physicians who value flexibility and freedom over money and titles and status and things like that. And then all of a sudden, around the time when you started doing locums, it started to really, really blow up. But now I think that there's both the older generation who are seeing younger physicians have this flexibility and they're like, I want a little bit of that. And then there's more and more younger physicians who have that mindset that you have. But I'm curious about what it's like in residency. What were most people thinking? Was it very well accepted, or something that was kind of like, I don't know about that?
And that's such an interesting perspective because I've seen the same thing in my career as a locum physician and when I was in residency. So, like most people, when we're starting off trying something we've never done before, we ask all our friends. So I was asking everyone I could talk to, my attendings, the fellows, the other interns. Have you heard of locum tenens work? Have you done it for PM&R? Like, what's the vibe, what's the feel? And I got a lot of mixed feedback at first. A lot of people, especially some of my attendings who had been there for sometimes decades or a long period of time, their perspective, like you mentioned, was sort of like people that do locum work have behavioral problems or can't get a permanent job, or have a bit of a negative connotation. So when I was first learning about it from the clinical side, that's what I was getting feedback wise. And I would even ask administrators, what are the thoughts on locum tenens physicians that come and work at a facility or whatever? And so they were like, well, we don't love to do it. And sometimes it's like a last resort type of situation. So to be fair, my intro to locum work, at least from the perspective of my peers, wasn't stellar. But luckily I was curious enough and I was like, I don't know, this still sounds really amazing, getting paid more to travel than you would taking a permanent job and having your housing covered, the flight covered, the rental car. All of those things sounded really appealing to me. So luckily I pursued and wanted to figure things out on my own. But no, really no other residents were talking about doing locum tenens medicine. No other med students had heard of it. That it really wasn't something that people were talking about. They were like, oh, okay, all right, you're going to be a locums doctor. Like, good luck. Go ahead and do that, while everyone else is looking for academic positions or private practice to join and things like that. But I've never been afraid of trying something different or being outside of the box. So I didn't mind that other people weren't really doing it or interested in it. I think any situation can be great if you make it such. So I was determined to give it a try. And then interestingly, when the pandemic hit, so I graduated in 2020, right at the peak of all the craziness, there were actually almost no locum jobs for my specialty in 2020. So it took me a good 6 or 7 months after I graduated residency to get my first locum job. So you can believe I was really stressed and I was like, maybe this isn't for me and I need to just buckle down and get a full-time job and be like everyone else. But luckily I held out until I got my first locum job. And I knew that first day, that first week working that job, that I had made the right decision. So, and since then it's gone off like crazy, like right now I'm turning down jobs left and right all the time. So it's definitely gotten more popular, I think, in the last couple of years.
I love hearing that. How about on the cultural side of things? When you go to a new hospital, what have you noticed? Are people pretty receptive to locums? Do you ever feel like they treat locums differently than their own perm surgeons, or is it unique for each hospital?
I think each place is different, but like when you're coming into a new group, like you're the new kid in school, everyone's kind of like feeling you out, trying to see like, can we trust this person? Are they good at their job? Like everyone's trying to feel each other out. And I'm doing the same thing. Like, which nurses can I trust? Which therapists are like, really killing it? So we're all kind of doing this thing in the beginning where we're feeling each other out. But then I think people see that I'm there because I'm genuinely interested about their community, about their town, their culture, and they really warm up to me pretty fast. And then by the end, they're like begging me not to leave. So it always has worked out positively, but certainly there are places where other people are like, oh, locums position, like, they don't want to really engage or get super connected or close or hear what the deal is. But I do make it my mission to be an ambassador to the locum community and change people's minds about what a locum physician is. So I think I'm doing a pretty decent job at that.
I do think that, and going back to what you're saying, it's like you need to have the confidence to embrace this and not be worried about what other people are thinking. If this is something that calls to you, be confident about and show up and be proud of what you do. So you are a great ambassador. So walk me through your journey. It sounds like you've been doing this for just over 3 years. But tell me about like some of the places that you've been. What does that journey look like? How long have you stayed in one place? Are you rotating pretty quickly through different locums opportunities, or what does that 3 years look like for you?
Yeah, there's been so much variety, which is again another reason I like doing locum work. And I'll say, these are the highlights and the positive things. And not everything in the locum world is rainbows and butterflies. It's hard being on the road, traveling a lot, being away from your home base, your family, potentially things like that. But for me, I've done such a variety of different assignments that I've gotten a lot of different experiences. So my first assignment was actually 1 week. And it was local to the state that I am from in Kentucky. So I did 1 week at an inpatient facility, and that was my first introduction. And then my next assignment was actually 9 months in Northern Ohio. Usually for locum physicians, we work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or some variation of that, maybe 1 week off, 3 weeks on, or whatever they need. And we're splitting it with another travel physician usually. So that's what I did in Ohio. So I kind of got a taste for what travel medicine was like. And then I really got to dive in deep with my facility in Ohio, which I loved. By the end, we were all very close, and I was able to hand off the unit to a full-time physician, and they could kind of carry the torch from there. So it was a very rewarding experience as my first long-term locum job. So you just really learn a ton of stuff along the way. And then I really got into some interesting geographical areas. So I went to South Carolina. I wanted to be near the beach. I found a really beautiful unit there that was fantastic. Spent several months with them. And then I was determined to get into California. I wanted to check out the West Coast. And so then I got an assignment in California. And then I started getting a little more brave as I was doing different assignments. And then I tried out Alaska. I'd never been to Alaska, and I went to Anchorage, and it is just a wild, beautiful place that I fell in love with. And then I just got back a week ago from an assignment in Montana. So it's taken me all over the country, really.
I love that. I think when I found your page when you were up in Alaska, I was asking you about that, and then I saw you traveling through Montana. You were at that Devil's Tower
Yeah.
monument. That was
Yeah.
awesome. So I have a question for you, circling back on doing new locums assignments. I heard you mention that it's kind of like the first day at school. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people, they're understandably, it can be make you nervous to try out a new facility. Come in, it's like the first day of school.
Mhm.
But what do you do? Can you give me some ideas on, or share with my audience on some ideas on what to do to acclimate or to, get to know the people in the facility? Do you have any practices that you recommend as far as meeting people and getting acclimated and familiar and them with you?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first week you're there, it's really a lot of building relationships and bonds. You can't walk in and say, we're going to do things this way, this way, this way. I think of myself as I'm there to help a unit or a facility during a time where they don't have their regular person there. So that's stressful for them. And they're not sure how I operate. They're not sure if, how I might operate with them. So I try to allay a lot of fears. I'm pretty laid back, as are many physiatrists in my field. And so I try to make sure that I can reassure them that I'm here to help and I'm not here to disrupt your whole lives. I'm just here to, keep things going in a positive direction and help you in any way that I can. So seeing me as a friend or an ally rather than someone that's just there to change everything helps a lot. And one thing I like to do, which just came naturally because I was curious, is I like to ask people what are their favorite things to do in their town, because people love talking about, if they're in a little tiny town that no one has ever heard of, they love that someone's showing interest in their town and want to know, what restaurants to go to or what monuments to see or what's like the cool thing to do there. So I keep a running list literally every place I go of the top things people recommend. So then I can get involved with their community, and then they love sharing that information. And if it's somewhere that's, interesting, that is appropriate, I'll ask if they want to go with me. Like, oh, would you want to check this out together? Or do you want to do this thing or show me where this is? And that, I think, really just kind of like relaxes a lot of people and shows that, I'm a friend, I'm there to be trusted, and I'm there to help people.
That's incredible. I love that. It was open-ended questions, and people do feel very proud of their community or the hospital, the culture. Such a great question to ask. Now, how about some of the connections that you've made during your locum tenens journey? Is it when you go into a hospital and you leave, do you carry those connections on with you? Do you make friends with people where you stay in contact, or do you just don't hear from them or see them again?
I love staying in contact with people, and you never know who you might run across again. So in the locum world, it can be very small. So a lot of times I'll run into physicians and we've covered the same facility, or we've worked with the same people, or the same agency, or even the same agent. And so we can talk and have that discussion and say, oh, well, I found this issue at this one place, or did you ever notice that, this was the way that they did this here that I'd never seen before? So it's really fun to bump into other physicians that have been at the exact places that you have, and talking shop to other physicians. You're like, oh yeah, that wasn't just me. This person thought the same thing, or hadn't, struggled with this or whatever. And then in terms of the nurses and therapists, I'm a sucker for friending them on Facebook, just so I can see what they're up to. They can see what I'm up to. And so I'll friend a lot of those people that I work with on my Facebook page, so they can kind of follow and see what I'm doing, and I can see what they're up to. And I find that that's a really fun bond to keep. And sometimes I have like a question, like a therapy question or a nursing question, and I'll message one of my previous therapists and say, hey, remember we did a technique on that one person? What did we do? Or you taught me about that. And can you explain to me again? Because I have another patient here that I think would benefit. And that really strengthens the bond as well, and helps me take that knowledge that I learned from that one facility onto the next facility.
So let's talk about locums, agencies, or reps. I happen to know, this was just by chance, but I happen to know one of your locums reps. I don't know if you're working with multiple agencies or not, but one of the reps that you work with, she's a legend in the industry. I've known her for about 10 years. I would consider her to be a big influence on my career. But when it comes to locums agencies or locums reps, and I warn people about this on my end, but I don't have the same perspective as you. I see people doing shady things or making it about the money. I'm very invested in what I do because I feel like I'm a pathway to helping somebody live a better life. And that's kind of like the theme about this podcast, is creating a life on your own terms and taking control of your skill set. But do you have any advice when it comes to finding an agency or a representative that you work well with? Any red flags that you look out for?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And shout out to Carrie, who you're talking about. She was actually recommended to me from a friend that I met through a local Facebook group. So there's some really good groups out there where we can talk to other peers about, hey, this is a good recommendation, or here's a red flag. Have you all experienced this before? And that community has been super helpful for me and other locum physicians that are interested in getting into the space. So my first tip would be to check out some of those Facebook pages specifically for locum physicians. because there's a lot of good information there. And then from there, you ask and find out like what are the recommended agencies, the red flags that you can look for. There's some people that might be a little more aggressive probably than other agents, and you find that they might be aggressive up front and to get your attention, which I understand. It's they want to get your business and things like that. And then if you go down that rabbit hole with them, sometimes there's a high turnover at that agency, so you might stop hearing from them and then it's a different person, and that can be a little off-putting because you're kind of retelling your story over and over and over again. Whereas like with an agency where you have a long-term relationship with someone, they know you, they know about your family, they know about your preferences, and they can really tailor jobs to your personality almost, and they really know your successes and failures with past assignments so that they can really handpick different facilities for you. Yeah, I mean, obviously you're picking them too, and you're agreeing on what assignments to go to. But I think feeling like you are not just a number is really important for someone finding an agency, and feeling like, because that agent is really going to be in charge of a lot of aspects of your life as you're traveling. They're going to be in charge of your flight, where you stay, how you get your rental car, getting paid. They're going to be very involved and weaved into your day-to-day on this assignment. So you really have to trust each other. And that I think is important to establish that relationship ahead of time. And if you get, a gut feeling like, I don't know, I'm not really feeling this connection, you listen to that. And as most physicians, we're pretty good at listening to our gut. So that's my biggest advice.
I love that. If there's a new physician who's never done locums and they were talking to you and you've had 3 years of experience doing this, what would you tell them, like, as first questions to ask if they're talking with a few agencies, they haven't done anything yet, talking with a few reps, but are there questions that you would recommend that physician to ask the locums rep about their agency or about their experience?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I made a list on my website. It's a blog post that I just put out a couple of weeks ago. And I've actually been using this list throughout since the very first assignment. I was getting to assignments and then saying, I didn't ask about the census, or like silly things like I didn't ask about their, code protocol, if there's a code team, or if I'm running the code, or, things like that, which as I went from assignment to assignment, I just added them to my little notebook, and then I made them into a whole list. So whenever I meet a new physician that's thinking about getting into locum work, I send them the list. I said, these are the things to ask your agency, and then ask while you're on the interview with the facility. And this should really help give you a full picture of what that facility is like. So there are things like, what's the support staff like? What's your daily census like? What's the call expectation? Can you get consultants to your unit, or is it a freestanding facility? Things like that you might not think about until you're there and you're wishing you had thought to ask those things. So that I have on my website, but I will usually give that first off to people that are just starting out and thinking about taking on their first job, because these are things I wish that I knew when I was starting, because I had to kind of figure them out the hard way. And so I'm just trying to provide educational material for people who are just getting started, or things that I wish I knew about.
I love that you're doing that. We'll drop your blog and that list in the show notes. But you mentioned that right now opportunities are very abundant. So it sounds like
Yeah.
you built a brand, a business, a locums business, a brand. Tell me more about what you did to become a sought after locum tenens physician.
I'm not sure that there was any one specific thing that I did. I was always trying to be myself and trying to be genuine at each place that I went. And I thought of each assignment more as my opportunity to represent not only my specialty, but any training that I did, or any knowledge that I've gained, my mentors before me that have taught me, an opportunity to show what I know and how much I love my specialty. And when I go into assignments being that representative, I think that really comes through and shows. And that's why people want me to come back or want me to be on another assignment or do more weekends, is because I'm really trying to be a good liaison to my specialty, to locums in general, and really change the thought and the mindset of what a locum doctor is. And so I think that's probably the most helpful advice I can give.
I love that. I can feel that. I can resonate with that because I feel the same way about what I do. I just feel so passionate about it and invested. People can sense that. What's it like on the go? Like, well, before I ask you that question, how much are you working per month typically?
That's a really good question. As I'm doing my taxes right now, I really need to figure out exactly how many days I worked in 2023, because there's like W-2s here and 1099s and all these, different things. So I need to sit down and figure out exactly how many days I've worked in a year. But so for example, I just worked like 6 weeks straight, Alaska, Montana, another facility in Ohio. And now I'm taking 5 weeks off just to kind of regroup, recharge. So probably if I had to guess, I'm working like 220 days a year and then taking, planned intentional breaks in between there. Like I took the whole month of January off to work on my website, to work on business endeavors. I'm, taking time off this month to recharge, revisit, my website and things like that. So I would probably say I'm in the 220 to 250 days out of the year that I'm working. And that really works for me. I know it doesn't work for everyone. Obviously your paychecks aren't necessarily consistent. But I find that when I give myself a good amount of time off to breathe, I come back and I'm a better doctor and I'm just recharged and I'm happy to be at, my next assignment.
What do you do to stay healthy when it comes to nutrition and eating while you're on assignment, or things that you like to do as far as activities, working out, or any self-care? Any tips around that?
Yeah, I think that's really crucial to staying balanced while you're on an assignment. And it's one of those things that's really easy to lose sight of. When you're in places like Alaska, it's really easy to keep your fitness up because there's hiking to do, there's snowshoeing, there's snowboarding, like every outdoor activity that you can think of, you have available to you. Same in Montana. There's so many things to do outdoors. So I try to make a point of doing whatever outdoor activity is, specific to that area. So Montana, there's beautiful hikes. There's a lot of fishing on the Missouri River. So those were the things that I was doing when I was there to be outside and be active. And then in Alaska, I was trying everything. I was doing rock climbing, which I'm not a rock climber, but I was there to try. I took flight lessons while I was there. I did all kinds of hiking, snowboarding. I got snowshoes. I did everything. So I try to jump in and really immerse myself in whatever the location has to offer. When I was in South Carolina, we were going to the beach a lot. My dog loves the beach, so she came with me on that assignment. And so we spent a lot of time, running around on the beach and just doing water sports and things like that. In terms of food, it can be hard to really plan out your meals, especially if you're, say, in a hotel room. I really try to advocate for myself to be in an Airbnb or a place with a kitchen. So mentally, it's just like much more calming and comforting to be in a place that feels like home rather than a hotel room. But also so that I can cook for myself. I'm not the greatest chef, but I know it's better than ordering takeout. So I use Instacart and I'll just deliver all my groceries on that first day, set everything up, do my meal prep. And then a lot of times the facilities will have a cafeteria or a doctor's lounge that have some other things that can kind of supplement along the way. But it's hard to stay on top of those things. I also try to I just saw I have like a foldable yoga mat. That's my travel yoga mat. And I take it with me on most assignments. So I can do some journaling and yoga and meditation in the morning just to kind of get me right and centered before I go into work. So that's kind of how I try to keep up with things when I'm on the road. It's not easy though. It's not easy.
I love that you mentioned meditation. I've been wanting to talk a little bit more about that on this podcast at some point because I just think it's so nourishing to give your mind a break and some space and to be able to process things, especially with as stressful as healthcare can be. So I have two questions for you before we wrap this up. The first one is what when you look back at your three plus years of locums, what was the most difficult situation that you've been, or the different most the hardest experience that you've had in that three years?
Well, I probably have to say my most difficult and most rewarding assignment were the same, which is when I went to Alaska. And that's why I love doing some of these assignments. I knew going to Alaska in the dead of winter by myself, away from my family, my dog, my friends, was going to be a challenge. And it really pushed me in a way that allowed me to discover new things about myself. Like I was hiking but alone, but I had my bear spray and I had, all the things that I needed to stay safe. And I challenged myself to do things that I would not normally do that were outside of my comfort zone. So while that was the biggest challenge for me mentally, physically, just from a stance of being away from home, I learned so much about myself that it was ended up being my absolute favorite assignment. And I'm going back, there's more assignments there, but doing that in the dead of winter on my own, that was a real gut check, and it really helped me say, okay, I can still do these things on my own. I'm an independent woman and I can take care of myself, even if that is in the middle of Alaska. So that was really empowering, but very challenging at the same time.
Oh, I love that. I was actually going to ask you those two questions. What's the most rewarding? And it was the same thing, but I'm going to replace that because I still want to ask you one more thing. If you were what advice? What is the one piece of advice that you would give? There's going to be somebody out there who's just they started hearing about locums. They pulled up their phone and they're like, "Let me see if there's any podcasts." They end up listening and they hear this episode with you, but they haven't done it. What is the one biggest, most important piece of advice that you would give somebody who is new to this world?
I think the simplest thing that I would say is you can try it. And if you don't like it, you don't have to keep doing it. So you try an assignment. If it doesn't work out, if do your 3 weeks there and you just weren't feeling it, you're not committed to them for 3 years like you are a permanent job. I'm not saying you need to put in your 30 days and say, nah, that wasn't my thing. You gotta, put in your time and make sure you're putting in good effort. But you can try it, and then if you don't like it, you don't do it again. Or if you want to try a different place. So there's very, in my opinion, low risk and so much reward to be gained. So it's really the perfect try before you buy scenario. You get to test out all sorts of different places. So just, I don't know, give it a try.
Well, thank you for sharing so much value. I've just enjoyed this time with you. You're just lighting me up to hear about your journeys. Where can people find you? We're going to drop this in the show notes, but tell me where's the easiest place people can connect with you and find your content?
Well, I just launched my website, drjacobshealth.com, and I'm also on Instagram. I'm an elder millennial, so I'm doing my best on the Instagram front, but my handle is the Locum Lady. So you can find me on either of those places.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jacobs. For the audience, this is your call to action. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure that you go to her Instagram page or her website and follow her. And then if you know somebody who could use this message, please share this episode with that person. Thank you so much, and I will catch you on the next episode.
Thank you.